Okay, so you're looking for an API gateway and you need it to be Kubernetes native. You want it to be open source and you want to manage your configurations declaratively. I'm going to show you how to do all of that today from the command line and using completely open source tools, most of which are built by Tyk. So to dive right in, first thing we're going to need is a gateway to manage. And here I'm going to use the Tyk OSS deployment repository in order to deploy that. So I'm on a brand new cluster here running in Minikube. If I get, if we check our kube context, we have, I'm running in the demo cluster, and then kubectl, or K for short, get namespaces. It's quite bare bones. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the OSS. There we go. So now we're in this repository, Tyk OSS Kubernetes deployment. I just clone this repo, and then we'll do a kubectl apply here. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. And so what that did is it created a gateway in Redis running in my default namespace. Okay, so we'll check it's running, it's creating the containers. If I do logs here, we can see it's actually now up and running. Okay, so if I check again, kubectl get pods, we can see that gateway is running and Redis is still being created. Okay, and there we go. So it's it failed for a second, and now it's connected to Redis, or it looks like it's actually still connecting. kubectl get deployments. There we go. kubectl get pods, and now that's running. Check our logs. Looks like it's now connected. Okay, so that's all we had to do is just run that one single command. Now our gateway is running on port 8080 by default. So let's open up Visual Studio Code here, and we can take a look at that. So here in our gateway deployment, we have some config files. It's running on port 8080, and the secret to manage everything is foo. Cool. So how do we access it? So I'm just going to open up a port forward tunnel. So namespace Tyk. Oh, okay. So I'm going to do kubectl port forward to this service, Tyk SVC 8080 on my host to 8080 on the service. And now we can try, so we can do a curl to localhost 8080, and I want the hello endpoint. And there we go. We can see a connection got handled. So what we did is we requested this endpoint on 8080. So that's mapping to this service on 8080, and that service is forwarding traffic to the gateway pods. And they received the request. They received a request for the hello endpoint, and it returned back with this information. So if we try, let's try a protected endpoint, Tyk reload. It says error, and so we have to give it a header, which is xtyk authorization. And the password, or the secret rather, is foo, which we set in the environment variables. And there we go. So next step is to create an API. So I'm going to use Postman for this. So here in Postman, I actually pulled in the Gateway API Swagger from the official documentation at tyk.io/docs, and then imported it into Postman here. And so here we see we have a list API API that we can invoke. So here, Tyk APIs, if I send that request, we get a response back. I already filled in the authorization header. Where is it? Headers, and there it is. Okay, cool. And so we get back a list. It's an array, and in this array, there's a single item. It's called Tyk Test API, and the listen path is tykapitest.com, and it reverse proxies to HTTP bin. So let's try that. Let's go here, let's go localhost 8080/Tyk API test, and I want the get endpoint, and of course we get auth field missing. It's a protected API. So I'm going to use a different API. I'm going to use the create a key API, and I'm going to make an API call. Request malformed, it's a post. Why was the request malformed? Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the body here. So here's my body. Okay, yeah, so I have to fill all this in. Instead, I'm going to use an API request that's similar, that is doing the same thing. So this is Tyk keys, another example here, except the body is already filled in. Switch this to JSON. So yeah, here's the payload for the key. So the access rights, I'm going to give it access to API with the ID 1. So that's the key for the map. Let's clean this up so we can see what we're looking at here. Whoops. There we go. Paste that in here, and then we're going to do beautify. There we go. So now here we can see access rights. It's the key is 1. That's the API ID, and again the API ID in here is 1, and the name is that's fine. We can leave that as is. So if we go back, and you might be wondering, where does this API ID come from? Well, if we look at the list of APIs, we go up to the top, we can see for this API definition, the API ID is 1 here. Okay, so now we're going to create a key that gives us access to that API. Okay, so same error, we have to add our foo secret. Okay, so that's Tyk authorization foo, and send that off. Okay, status okay, so we have a new key, we can grab that key, and then we can go back and try to access our API again. We're going to add a header, or actually just add authorization, API key. This is an authorization header, and the password or the value for that header is the key we just created. And now we have access to our API. Cool. So in order to manage that API, let's say I want to send it to a different endpoint or something like that, I would use the Gateway's API to manage this API. Or I could do it declaratively using the Tyk Operator. And that brings us to part 2 of the video, which is how to install Tyk Operator for the and use it to manage the open source gateway. So for that, we're going to go to a different repository here under Tyk Operator. And then we want the installation instructions. Okay. So let's follow this through. Let's start here at connecting Tyk. Okay, so first we create a namespace, which is Tyk Operator System. And then we create a secret, which contains the connection information that tells the Tyk Operator how to connect to Tyk and which mode it's running in. So going back to the other repository, there's a section at the very bottom under Tyk OSS deployment that says Tyk Operator. If you're combining it, you can use these information. So we can paste that in. So we're creating a secret in the Tyk Operator namespace. The authorization secret is foo, and then the org and the mode are both OSS, and then the Tyk URL is just the DNS, the Kubernetes DNS of that service, including the port, and we'll create that. Okay, and then next we can copy this command and paste it. So let's test our secret. And we can see our secret is now in Kubernetes. It's encoded to space64. Next up is we're going to install the CRDs. So I'm just going to quickly go to the Tyk Operator repository, and there we are. Whoops. And then I'll just run the kubectl apply f helm CRDs. So this applied the CRDs in that repository, and this created the CRDs. So now I can do kubectl get CRDs, and there they are. Next up, install the cert manager. So this will install cert manager. Cert manager is going to be used to provision TLS certificates, and all of that is going to be created under the cert manager repository. So namespace, excuse me. So if I do kubectl get namespaces, we have cert manager here. And we actually have to wait for all of that to come up. So I'm going to copy this command, kubectl get all -n namespace cert manager. And that's starting to come up. Actually, it's all running. So we're ready to go. So ready for the final step, which is installing the Tyk Operator. I'll just copy that. So helm install foo under the helm repository in the helm directory, excuse me, in this repository, and that's going to be installed in the Tyk Operator system namespace. And there it is. So quickly we'll check which, so I'm in the default namespace. So now I'm just going to switch over to Tyk Operator system. So I don't have to always specify my namespace. And now if I check my namespace, it's Tyk Operator System. So I'm going to run commands in that context. So now I'll do kubectl get deployments, and there it is, kubectl get pods, and there it is. And I want to check the logs, so kubectl logs of that, and we can see now it's running. So I'll actually tail that. Awesome. So how do I create a new API definition? So let's go back to that repository. I'll open up Visual Studio Code. And there's a lot of examples that we can look at. If you go to, if you check the actual documentation here, we'll go back. So in the main page here, it gives you a lot of examples. The ones we're going to look at is API definitions. And there's a lot of API definition examples. So for example, if I want to proxy to a GraphQL API, or I want to do certain types of authentication, if I want to do routing and custom plugins and a bunch of other stuff. So I'm going to keep it simple for the sake of the demo. I'm just going to proxy to some API and protect the using auth token. So there's an example in here about how to proxy to existing APIs, migrating existing APIs, because I already have an API that got shipped, right? So if we go back to our Postman here, we can see there's already an API that got shipped as a test API. So what I want to do is I want to link this API to this YAML in order to manage it using the YAML moving forward, and the Tyk operator will be able to reconcile that. So here's our YAML, existing API. So this actually talks, so this is an API definition CRD. Here's the unique Kubernetes UID for this CRD definition once I create it. And then here's the spec, and this spec should match this one. So Tyk Test API, this is Tyk Test API in YAML. Protocol HTTP, it's active, it's going to reverse proxy to http bin.org, and then it has a new listen path. And then of course it's being protected by authorization. I'll save the best for last. So the API ID, this is not necessary if you're creating new APIs, but because I'm linking this CRD to an existing API definition, I will use the API ID that matches this API ID, which essentially will tell the Tyk operator to link this YAML to this existing API definition in Tyk. So now we can apply this. So I'm going to apply existing. There we go. So actually, which namespace am I going to be running in? Well, I suppose it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's run this. I'm going to apply this in my default namespace. Okay, let's give that a go. So that's been created. Go back to our logs here. We can see that the Tyk operator picked up the work here. It picked up a test API CRD, which is an API definition, and then it created it. So now this is our information, Tyk Test API. There's one item, and if I query this again, we can see that this information actually got updated. Tyk Test API is now in YAML, and if I go to the listen path, it's been updated to HTTP bin. So if we try our old information here, so Tyk API test/get with that key that we created, yeah, it continues to work. So that's good. And if we try our HTTP bin, that also works. Okay. So what I want to do next, I want to reload the API. There we go. So now it's been reloaded. I want to check the logs of that API. Let's see what we get. So kubectl get pods in the Tyk. Is it in the default namespace? Yes, it is. So there's our gateway. So I want to do kubectl logs of that, follow it in the namespace default. There we go. We can see now this has been reloaded. API loaded, API ID is 1, so we have those two APIs in there. All right, well, thanks for watching.